December 2020. The most anticipated game of the decade finally arrives. We expected a revolution. We expected a masterpiece that would change the RPG genre forever. But instead, we got a disaster. A broken, buggy mess that was literally unplayable for millions. T-posing NPCs, constant crashes, and graphics that looked like a PS2 tech demo. The hype didn't just die, it imploded. Sony did the unthinkable and pulled the game from the PlayStation Store. Investors sued, the studio's stock plummeted, and CD Projekt Red went from heroes to villains overnight. It was the biggest flop in gaming history. But that's not where the story ends. Against all odds, the developers refused to give up. They spent 3 years rebuilding Night City from the ashes. And today, it's finally the game we were promised. This is the story of the greatest comeback in gaming history. On paper, Cyberpunk 2077 was a titan. It sold 13 million copies in just weeks. It made its 8-year budget back in a single day. But behind the scenes, the foundation was rotting. The last-gen console versions, PS4 and Xbox One, were practically broken. We're talking about crazy lags, textures that looked like Minecraft, and crashes every 30 minutes. It wasn't just buggy. It was a product that should have never been released. But it wasn't just the technical mess. It was the broken promises. Remember the deep RPG mechanics they promised? The living, breathing city? On launch, the AI was a joke. Police didn't chase you. They literally spawned behind your back. Pedestrians had no pathfinding. The physics were non-existent. Bullets didn't even make ripples in the water. The community felt betrayed. The hype train hadn't just crashed, it had been derailed by corporate greed. Then came the fallout. On December 17th, Sony did the unthinkable. They pulled Cyberpunk from the PlayStation Store. For a AAA game of this scale, it was a death sentence. CD Projekt Red's stock price plummeted from $31 to $16 in a month. They weren't just losing players, they were losing millions of dollars in market value. Investors were furious, filing class action lawsuits, claiming the studio had lied about the game's performance. It was a PR nightmare of epic proportions. The studio's co-founders had to release a public mea culpa, admitting they ignored the red flags just to hit the holiday release window. They promised to regain our trust. But at that moment, nobody believed them. The Witcher 3 legends had become the villains of the gaming industry. The path to redemption looked impossible. 2021 was supposed to be the year of fixes, but instead it became a year of chaos. In February, CD Projekt Red suffered a massive cyber attack. Hackers stole the source code for Cyberpunk and The Witcher 3, threatening to leak everything if the studio didn't pay up. They refused to negotiate, and the resulting mess delayed the very patches the players were begging for. It felt like the universe itself didn't want this game to be fixed. Internal stability was crumbling too. Key leads, including the director of The Witcher 3, left the company. Every time a new patch dropped, like the massive 1.2 update with over 500 fixes, the reaction was the same. Is that it? People were still seeing NPCs floating in the air and cars clipping through the ground. The road was long and the progress was painfully slow. By mid-2021, Cyberpunk was nominated for RPG of the Year at some awards, but it lost to games that actually, worked. While the developers were fighting bugs, the community took matters into their own hands. Modders were adding features that should have been there from day one, like a working metro system. It was embarrassing for an AR studio. Even when the game finally returned to the PlayStation Store after 6 months, Sony put a huge warning label on it. Not recommended for PlayStation 4. It was a humiliation. At this point, most critics were ready to write Cyberpunk off as a permanent stain on the studio's legacy. But then, something impossible happened. In September 2022, Studio Trigger and Netflix released Cyberpunk Edgerunners. It wasn't just a good anime, it was a cultural phenomenon. It captured the soul of Night City in a way the launch version of the game never could. Suddenly, everyone wanted to be a merc again. 1 million players a day flooded back into the game. For the first time since launch, the conversation wasn't about bugs. It was about the world, the story, and the tragedy of David Martinez. CDPR seized the moment. They didn't just give us small fixes, they gave us a revolution. Patch 2.0 changed everything. They ripped out the old, boring skill trees and replaced them with gameplay that actually felt cyberpunk. They added vehicle combat, fixed the police, and then dropped Phantom Liberty. A spy thriller expansion that proved they still had the Witcher-level storytelling magic. After 3 years and hundreds of millions of dollars in post-launch support, the review scores on Steam finally ticked over to very positive. The impossible had happened. Cyberpunk 2077 is no longer a cautionary tale of failure. It's a story of survival. It shows us that in the world of AAA gaming, a bad launch doesn't have to be the end, if the developers are brave enough to face their mistakes. Night City is finally the masterpiece we dreamed of back in 2018.